The dark nebula was not a place that welcomed life. Its vast curtains of interstellar dust stretched like shrouds over the light of distant suns, swallowing color and warmth until only silence remained. It was here, in this shadowed cradle of the void, that the alien queen ruled her brood. Her empire extended across constellations, her fleets darkened the stars, and her name carried with it the weight of fear. She was called Serach, the devourer of moons, a monarch whose wrath carved legends into the bones of conquered worlds. Yet for all her terror, she held a secret softer than war, a clutch of daughters, her heirs, who were the promise of her dominion's future. The daughters were not ordinary offspring. Each had been born from the queen's genetic alchemy, crafted to embody her power, intellect, and predatory grace. Their presence commanded awe even in their youth, their carapaces gleaming with iridescence, their minds sharper than human steel. The court of the Hive looked upon them as divine, a living assurance that the queen's reign would stretch far beyond her own lifespan. But then, as the nebula drifted into a season of silence, they vanished. It was sudden, inexplicable. One night they lay coiled in the incubation chamber, their breathing steady, their alien dreams suspended in the nutrient mist. The next, the chamber stood empty, its sacred fluids still rippling as though disturbed by unseen hands. Panic did not come easily to the queen, but when her gaze fell upon the vacant chamber, her roar split the nebula like a dying star. The Hive shuddered, drones scattered into the void. Scouts were dispatched to scour asteroid belts and abandoned moons. Nothing, not a trace of the royal daughters remained. Serach's fury was boundless. She accused her generals of treachery, her priests of negligence, her drones of cowardice. Worlds trembled as her fleets descended, demanding answers from civilizations who had no knowledge of the loss. She burned 3 colonies in her grief, their ashes drifting through space as a warning. Whoever dared to steal her daughters would pay in suffering unimaginable. But despite the endless searching, the void returned no echoes. The nebula whispered, only silence. Yet elsewhere, far from the Hive's brutal reach, a human drifted through the stars. His name was Elias Caden, a relic of Earth's dwindling exploration program, a wanderer more than a soldier. His vessel, the Ardent Voyager, was small, barely a flicker compared to the battleships that prowled Serach's empire. He had no armies, no allegiance. Only a restless spirit and a fascination with the mysteries of the galaxy kept him alive in the void. He was charting a lonely course through forgotten space when he stumbled upon the anomaly. It began with a flicker on his scanners, an energy signature faint, erratic, like the last heartbeat of a dying machine. Curiosity led him closer, navigating through thick clouds of cosmic dust until his ship nearly collided with a derelict pod. Its shell was cracked, its markings foreign, alien. Cautiously, Elias reeled it in, unaware that this act would alter the fate of empires. Inside comma, he found them. At first, his mind could not grasp what he was seeing. The chamber opened to reveal shapes coiled together, their limbs tangled, their chests rising and falling in soft rhythms. They were smaller than he expected, almost delicate, though their features bore the unmistakable mark of something not human. Gleaming skin that shimmered under dim light, eyes sealed shut in slumber, claws folded against their bodies like fragile glass. They looked less like predators and more like children, frightened, exhausted, vulnerable. Elias's breath caught in his throat. Every instinct told him to be afraid, to jettison the pod before whatever lived inside awoke. Stories of the alien queen had traveled far, tales of worlds stripped bare, of soldiers turned to ash under her fleets. If these were truly her daughters, harboring them was not just dangerous, it was suicide. And yet, as he knelt closer, one of them stirred. A soft sound, almost like a sigh, escaped her. She shifted, curling instinctively against the warmth of his chest when he reached to steady her. The others followed, pressing close, their alien bodies radiating a strange, living heat. In that moment, Elias felt the universe tilt. They did not bare their teeth. They did not slice his flesh with claws or hiss with hunger. They sought only shelter, pressing against him like lost children. He froze, torn between terror and awe. The data feeds in his helmet screamed warnings. His training urged him to push them away, but his heart beat louder than all of it. Against reason, against survival, he allowed them to remain. His arms encircled them, hesitant but steady, and for the first time since their disappearance, the daughters of the alien queen slept in peace, far away. Deep in the heart of the dark nebula, Serok's roar carried across the stars once more. The Hive's oracles whispered of a bond forming beyond her reach, a fragile thread of fate tying her daughters to the most unlikely of guardians. The queen's grief curdled into rage, and her fleets prepared to move. But in the quiet of the ardent voyager, Elias could not know that the warmth pressed against him was both a miracle and a curse. He only knew that he could not let them go. The nebula burned with the queen's anger. Entire swarms churned through the void, their blackened wings blotting out starlight, their engines screaming like the cries of the damned. Serok's throne chamber pulsed with the rhythm of her rage. Bioluminescent tendrils curled across its vast walls, pulsing red, echoing the fury of their mistress. She sat upon her living throne, her towering frame armored in the chitin of long-dead enemies, her crown fused from the bones of kings who had once defied her. Her clawed hands dug into the throne's flesh as her voice rippled through the hive. "They are gone," she hissed, her words a chorus of layered tones, each more venomous than the last. "My blood, my heirs, stolen by cowards, hidden by shadows." Her generals prostrated themselves, their mandibles clicking in dread. None dared to speak. In the queen's grief, reason was a fragile thing, shattered as easily as glass. Still, one dared to whisper, "Perhaps they wander, my queen. Perhaps they—" The words had barely left his mandibles before Serok's tail lashed, cleaving his body in two. His remains slid across the chamber floor, steaming in the acidic air. The others shivered, their antennae trembling. "Silence," Serok thundered. "I will not be consoled with lies. They were taken, and I will burn 1,000 worlds to find them." Across her empire, the Hive obeyed. Warships that had lain dormant rose from the dark like leviathans stirring from slumber. Colonies that had dared to resist her centuries ago now trembled, their skies choked with fleets demanding answers. Every species under her rule felt the press of her grief, for Serok's love was a rarity, and her vengeance was legend. But grief was not her only companion. In the deeper shadows of her throne chamber, the oracles stirred. They were ancient, their bodies shriveled, their eyes white with visions of time. They whispered as one, voices weaving like threads of silk. "Their cries are silent," murmured the first. "Their light is hidden," hissed the second. "Their bond is not broken," breathed the third. Serok turned, her body casting monstrous shadows across the chamber. "Speak plainly, or be consumed." The oracles trembled, yet their voices merged again. They live. They are not lost to death, but to destiny. They are bound to a heart not of the Hive, a heart of flesh, fragile, human. The chamber shook with the queen's roar. Human? The word dripped with disdain, with disgust. Those crawling vermin who scavenge in the cracks of empires? They dare touch what is mine. Her rage flared, but within it stirred something colder. Fear. The Hive knew no softness, no weakness. But humans were unpredictable. Fragile, yet enduring. Weak, yet defiant. If her daughters truly lay in human arms, then perhaps something had shifted in the weave of fate. Something even Serok's power could not easily sever. Still, she refused to yield. "Find them," she commanded, her voice shaking the very walls. "Search every colony, every station, every drifting husk in the void. Bring me this human, and I will peel his mind apart until I hear their voices in his screams." The Hive scattered to obey. Scouts swarmed through hyperspace lanes, infiltrators wormed into human colonies, whispers spread like poison through the black markets of the galaxy. The Queen's hunt had begun. Meanwhile, Elias knew nothing of the storm gathering behind him. His days on the ardent Voyager passed in a haze of disbelief and fragile wonder. The daughters stirred more often now, their slumber broken by hunger, by curiosity, by the instinct to cling. They studied him with wide, luminous eyes, their pupils adjusting like shifting galaxies. They chirped in sounds he did not understand, yet somehow felt, tones that carried not just noise but emotion, waves of fear, longing, and a warmth that surprised him. He tried to keep distance at first. He told himself they were dangerous, that he would find a way to return them without drawing attention. But every attempt faltered. When he placed them back in the pod, they whimpered until he relented. When he tried to sleep alone in the crew quarters, they crawled silently through the vents and nestled against him, their claws curling gently against his suit, their warmth seeping through the cold metal walls of the ship. One night, as the stars wheeled silently outside, Elias awoke to find the eldest gazing at him. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with malice, but with a strange, searching calm. She reached out, pressing a clawed hand against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For reasons he could not name, Elias pressed his hand over hers. She made a soft sound, almost like relief, and drifted back into sleep. In that moment, Elias knew he was no longer just their accidental discoverer. He was their shelter, their chosen refuge. And though he had no idea what storms his choice would summon, he could not turn away. But deep in the nebula, the Queen's fleets ignited their engines. Echoes of her fury raced faster than light, and already the name of the human was being hunted, carried by whispers Elias had yet to hear. The ardent Voyager drifted on the quiet edge of a starless gulf, a lone ember moving through endless dark. Within its steel ribs, Elias Caden wrestled with a secret he knew was too heavy for one man to carry. He had sent no transmissions to the human colonies, no signals to his old contacts in the scattered outposts of the Terran remnant. To speak aloud of what lay nestled against him each night would be to invite doom upon himself and, more dangerously, upon the children who had chosen him. He could already imagine what would happen. Governments dissecting them for power, pirates bartering them as trophies, mercenaries chasing bounties whispered in darkened taverns. And, worse still, the Queen herself descending upon whatever poor world harbored them. So Elias said nothing. He let the days pass in silence, caring for the daughters in the only way he knew, awkward, clumsy, yet sincere. He scavenged what little food the ship had, altering its nutritional mix to sustain them, though they seemed to draw more comfort from the steady rhythm of his presence than from any meal. He gave them names, not because they asked, but because he could not bring himself to call them only by what they were. The eldest he called Lyra, for her luminous eyes. The second, Kesh, restless and sharp, always exploring the corners of the ship. The third, smaller, often trembling in her sleep, he called Solon, after the faint light of a dying star he once charted. They responded to the sounds of their names with curious tilts of their heads, soft clicks in their throats, sometimes even the echo of what might have been laughter. In their alien way, they were learning him, just as he was learning them. But with each day, the weight of the secret pressed heavier upon him. The pod that had carried them was damaged beyond repair, its origin clear in its markings. Hive script, etched in patterns that glowed faintly when touched. Elias traced those markings late at night, his breath tight in his chest, realizing with terrible certainty that he sheltered the daughters of the most feared monarch in the galaxy. If word reached the Hive, he did not want to imagine what would follow. It was during one such night of anxious study that the ship's long-range sensors picked up a flicker, a shadow on the edge of the system, moving with purpose, too fast, too coordinated to be a natural body. Elias felt his blood chill. The Hive was searching, perhaps not for him specifically, yet, but their scouts were already sweeping the void. It would not be long before they crossed his path. He made a decision then, one that changed the course of his wandering life. He would not abandon the children. He would not sell them to save himself, nor deliver them to human governments that would turn them into weapons. Instead, he would hide them, shield them, and if necessary, fight for them. For reasons he could not yet name, he felt as though the universe had laid them in his arms for a purpose. But hiding them required more than silence. He needed allies, and allies were dangerous. His first stop was a drifting trade station called Grendel's Rest, a battered ring of steel orbiting a dead moon. It was a place where smugglers, mercenaries, and wanderers like himself gathered to trade stories and supplies. He docked the ardent Voyager in the shadow of the ring, keeping the children hidden in the deeper recesses of the ship. He wrapped them in the thermal blankets of his quarters, whispering to them gently before stepping out alone. They clutched at his sleeves, their wide eyes shining with unease, but he promised he would return. The station smelled of rust and oil, of too many bodies crammed into too little space. Elias moved through the crowd with a cautious gait, avoiding the eyes of bounty hunters who looked too long at his face. He had one goal: to acquire modifications for his ship, shielding that would mask his energy signature from Hive sensors. The task was dangerous, the credits in his account thin, but desperation lent him resolve. He found what he needed in the workshop of an old mechanic, a wiry woman named Rin, who had once patched his ship after a pirate skirmish. She eyed him with suspicion as he laid out his request. "Hive cloaks aren't toys," she said, wiping grease from her hands. "What trouble have you dragged yourself into this time, Caden?" Elias hesitated, words sticking in his throat. He could not tell her the truth, not fully. Instead, he murmured, "I found something worth protecting. If the Hive finds me, they'll tear this station apart to get to it." Rin studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. Then she sighed, muttering curses under her breath. "You've got the look of a man who won't turn back. Fine, I'll help you. But if your secret brings the Queen's wrath here, I'll put a knife in your gut myself before she does worse." By the time Elias returned to the ardent Voyager, the station's artificial dawn lights had begun to flicker. He slipped into the ship's quarters, expecting to find the daughters asleep. Instead, he froze. The three of them sat waiting. Their luminous eyes locked on him, their claws clicking softly against the metal floor. Lyra stepped forward, pressing her small hand to his knee, tilting her head as if she could sense the storm in his heart. Kesh hissed softly, not in threat but in a kind of warning, while Solon clung to his leg with quiet desperation. They had not understood his words when he left them, but they had felt the fear beneath them, and they were afraid of losing him. Elias sank down beside them, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I won't leave you. Not now. Not ever." The promise was quiet, spoken only to the children and the silent ship. But the galaxy itself seemed to shiver as if it had heard. For far across the stars, the Hive's hunt pressed closer, and in Sarek's throne chamber, the oracles whispered again. His secret grows, his bond deepens, the choice will come, and with it, the breaking of empires. The ship moved through the void like a ghost, its new cloaking fields humming faintly in the dark. Elias sat in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the stars, though his thoughts were elsewhere. Behind him, in the warmth of the small quarters, the daughters slept once more, their bodies curled together like coiled streams of light. But when the nightmares came, as they often did not cling to each other. They clung to him. It began one night when the ship passed through a stretch of space scarred by ion storms. The metal walls rattled, lightning flashed across the viewports, and the hum of the engines became a low, uneasy growl. Elias lay awake, restless. When he felt movement at his side, Lyra climbed onto the narrow bunk first, her luminous eyes wide with fear. She pressed her small form against his chest, trembling. Then Kesh followed, her claws clicking nervously against the floor before she scrambled up, curling tightly against his arm. Solon came last, half asleep, crawling with soft whimpers until she tucked herself into the hollow of his shoulder. For a long moment Elias froze, uncertain. Their skin was cool at first, but warmed quickly against him. Their bodies radiated a strange hum, like faint vibrations that resonated with his heartbeat. He expected claws to pierce his skin, for teeth to graze his neck, but instead they simply pressed closer, their breathing falling into rhythm with his own. Lyra tilted her head, placing her ear against his chest, and made a soft sound of wonder, as if the steady pulse of his heart was the most comforting thing in the universe. Elias let out a shaky laugh, the sound bitter and tender all at once. "You're not supposed to be here," he whispered, though his arms betrayed him by wrapping gently around their fragile forms. "You're supposed to be nightmares, monsters, not this." They didn't understand his words, but they understood his tone. Solon shifted closer, nestling under his chin, while Kesh's restless movements slowed until she was asleep. And Elias, who had drifted through the galaxy for years without anchor or kin, realized with a start that he had never been so needed in his life. The days that followed carried this fragile intimacy deeper. He awoke each morning with their weight against him, their strange hum mingling with the steady drum of his pulse. He found himself speaking to them as though they could understand, telling them stories of Earth, of oceans they had never seen, of forests that smelled of rain and soil. Sometimes they listened in silence, their glowing eyes fixed on his face. Other times they echoed sounds back, chirps and clicks that seemed like attempts at words. Slowly, a rhythm grew between them, not quite language, but communication nonetheless. And yet beneath the warmth, fear lingered. Elias knew what they were. He knew their mother would not rest, that fleets of fire and shadow scoured the stars even now. He had caught fragments on the comm relays, colonies burned, whispers of Sirach's rage stretching across sectors. The Hive was hunting with a fury the galaxy had not seen in decades, and though Elias had cloaked his ship, he knew it was only a matter of time before his path crossed theirs. One evening, as the ship coasted through a quiet system of broken asteroids, Elias sat in the cockpit while the daughters played in the corridor. He could hear them, small chirps, the scraping of claws against metal, the sound of laughter, alien yet bright. For the first time in years, the silence of space did not feel oppressive. But then, the console chimed. A signal. It was faint, encrypted, bouncing across channels. Elias frowned, running it through the filters. At first it seemed like static. Then a voice emerged, harsh, guttural, unmistakably Hive. His chest tightened. "The Queen's daughters. Alive. Seek the human vessel." He cut the signal quickly, fear coiling in his stomach. They were closer than he had thought. Perhaps they had already caught his scent. He turned in his chair, ready to call for the children, but he stopped in the doorway. They were huddled together on the floor, the three of them curled into one another. Lyra looked up first, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. She reached out a hand, beckoning him closer. Elias hesitated, his mind filled with warnings and calculations, but then he stepped forward. Solon pressed herself against his leg. Kesh tugged at his sleeve, and soon he was sitting among them, his back against the cold wall. They climbed into his lap as though it was the most natural place for them to be. Lyra rested her head against his chest again, listening to the beat of his heart. This time, Kesh followed, her restless energy stilled by the rhythm. Solon curled into his arms, sighing softly in her sleep. And though danger loomed nearer with every passing hour, Elias closed his eyes and let them stay. It struck him then how strange fate was. A human wanderer, a man with nothing left to call his own, had become the guardian of heirs who were supposed to inherit terror. He wondered if Sirach had ever held them this way, if the Queen of the Hive had ever allowed her heart to beat in unison with theirs. Somehow he doubted it. The hum of the engines carried them onward, deeper into the dark, while beyond the void, the Hive's fury grew sharper. But in that small moment, cocooned in warmth and the steady rhythm of breath and heartbeat, Elias allowed himself to believe that something fragile and impossible was being born. Something stronger than fear, something the Queen herself could never command. The collision began not with fire, but with whispers. News traveled through the void like radiation, unstoppable and unseen. Traders spoke of a lone human vessel seen slipping through the outer lanes, never staying long in one system, vanishing just before Hive patrols arrived. Some claimed the ship was cursed, its pilot carrying contraband that bent scanners to blindness. Others said the man aboard had stolen something sacred and that the Hive Queen herself scoured the galaxy for him. Every rumor carried weight, and every ear that heard them was quick to pass them along. Elias tried to ignore it. He kept the ardent Voyager moving, slipping between shadowed routes, always one step ahead. But the galaxy was tightening around him, a net of suspicion and greed. He could feel the threads closing in. The daughters sensed it too. Lyra grew restless, often staring at him with eyes that glowed brighter in the dark, as though she understood, the storm building beyond the hull. Kesh became defiant, scratching at the walls, testing the ship's sealed doors, as though she could fight the danger herself. Solon clung closer than ever, refusing to leave Elias's side, her small hands curling into his shirt whenever he tried to rise. Their instincts were sharper than his sensors, and their unease gnawed at him in the quiet hours. It was on a forgotten mining colony called Eridos that the worlds finally collided. Elias had docked there for supplies, desperate for water and fuel cells. The colony was bleak, dust storms sweeping across cracked ground, towers of rusting machinery clawing at the sky. The people were thin, their eyes hollow with years of labor under Hive tribute demands. They looked at him with suspicion when he walked the market lanes, but they sold him what he needed without questions. Still, he felt eyes following him. When he returned to the ship, arms heavy with supplies, he found Lyra waiting at the airlock. Her eyes were wide, her claws flexing nervously. She chirped a warning, a low, clicking sound he had learned to recognize as fear. Elias dropped the supplies and reached for his blaster. They came moments later, armed men, not Hive drones, but human mercenaries, their armor patched and painted with scavenged sigils. Pirates, opportunists, hunters of rumor. Their leader, a scarred man with a smile like a knife's edge, raised his weapon lazily. "Word is you've got cargo worth more than any ship in this rotten system," he drawled. "3 little prizes, soft as silk, glowing like jewels. You hand them over, wanderer, and maybe we let you keep breathing." Elias's stomach turned to ice. He raised his weapon, though his hands shook. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Oh, I know," the man sneered. "The Queen's spawn. Every bounty board in the galaxy is whispering about them. You're hiding them, and that makes you rich, or dead, your choice." The mercenaries began to close in, their boots grinding against the colony dust. Behind him, Elias heard the daughters' soft chirps, their claws scraping against the floor as they pressed against his legs. Solon whimpered. Lyra's eyes burned brighter, and Kesh let out a low hiss that froze the men for a heartbeat. Then the shooting began. Elias moved on instinct, pulling Solon behind him, firing wild bolts that lit the dust-choked air. The mercenaries answered with a storm of plasma, sparks ricocheting off the Voyager's hull. Lyra lunged forward, claws flashing, and for the first time, Elias saw a glimpse of the power bred into her. She slashed through one mercenary's armor. Like paper, her shriek splitting the air. Kesh followed, fast and furious, tearing at weapons before they could fire again. The men screamed, not just in pain, but in terror. Because these were no helpless children. These were daughters of Serok, heirs of the Hive. Elias fought alongside them, his blaster carving through the chaos, though his heart broke with every shot. He had wanted to protect them from this violence, to keep them children a little longer. But the universe had no patience for innocence. In minutes, the mercenaries lay broken on the ground, their leader crawling away in the dust before. Lyra pinned him down with a snarl. Elias stopped her, his hand catching her arm before she struck the killing blow. She turned on him, eyes wild, breath heaving. But then she stilled. Her gaze flicked from his face to his chest, to the heartbeat she had learned to trust. Slowly, reluctantly, she released the man, who scrambled away into the storm. The daughters, pressed against Elias in the aftermath, their claws smeared with blood, their bodies trembling. They were killers, yes, but they were also frightened children, clinging to the only comfort they knew. Elias dropped his blaster, gathering them into his arms despite the blood and the dust, his voice breaking as he whispered, "It's all right. I've got you. You're safe." But safety was a lie, and he knew it. The fight on Eridos would echo across the stars. Survivors would spread word that the Queen's daughters had been seen, alive, sheltered by a human, and Serach would hear far away in her throne chamber. The Queen already stirred. The oracles whispered of blood spilled on a nameless colony, of a bond tested by fire. Serach's claws tightened around the arm of her throne. She had burned worlds for less. "Find them," she commanded, her voice cold as the void. "Bring me the human who dares hold what is mine. Let him feel the weight of a mother's fury." The fleets moved, engines igniting like suns, and in the silence of the ardent voyager, Elias held the trembling children against his chest, his heart pounding. With terror and resolve, the collision of worlds had begun. The Hive's fleets cut across the stars like blades of shadow. Millions of drones stirred in their Hive ships, weapons powered, claws sharpened. The void shuddered beneath their advance, and at the center of this storm sat Serach, queen of the Hive. Her throne a living monument to conquest. Yet for all the fire she commanded, her heart was not steady. It pulsed with something dangerous, doubt. She had always known herself unbreakable. Her enemies called her merciless, her armies believed her divine. But in the silence between roars, she thought of her daughters. The last time she had touched them, they were small, curled in their incubation chamber, their soft clicks and chirps carrying the faint echo of her own voice. She had never shown them tenderness, not as humans understood it, but she had felt it, a warmth buried under layers of chitin and wrath. They were hers, her legacy, her future, and they were gone. The oracle's words gnawed at her. They are bound to a heart not of the Hive, a heart of flesh, fragile, human. Serach despised the thought. To imagine her daughters pressed against a creature of weakness, clinging to him, as though he could shield them from the universe, it filled her with a rage that burned brighter than any star. Yet, beneath the rage, another thought crept in. Why had they chosen him? Across the void, Elias carried that question too. He had fled Eridos in haste, pushing the ardent Voyager's engines past their limits, desperate to escape before the Hive descended. The daughters huddled close in the crew quarters, still trembling from the battle. Elias had cleaned their claws, wiped the blood from their iridescent skin, whispering to them though his own hands shook. "You're safe now," he said again. And again, though his heart told him otherwise, in quieter moments, he wondered if safety was even possible anymore. Every choice had narrowed the path further. He could no longer pretend to be only a wanderer. He was a guardian, bound by promises unspoken but unbreakable. And the daughters, for all their alien blood, seemed to understand. They pressed against him each night, their hearts sinking to his, as if drawing strength from his fragile pulse. But strength was not enough. The Hive would come. Humanity would notice. The galaxy would demand answers. And Elias had none, save the certainty that he would not surrender them. The inevitable meeting came sooner than he expected. The Hive found him near the shattered remains of a long-dead star, where the ardent Voyager had slipped to hide among drifting debris. His sensors flared red, screaming warnings as colossal ships emerged from the void, their hulls gleaming with organic armor, their engines burning like veins of fire. They surrounded him with terrifying precision. Escape was impossible. Elias's hands hovered over the controls, his breath ragged. The daughters stirred behind him, their eyes wide, their instincts alive with fear and recognition. Lyra pressed her hand against his shoulder, her gaze flicking to the looming dreadnought that dwarfed all others. They knew. Their mother was there. The calm crackled, then filled with a voice that rattled through bone and steel alike. Serach spoke. Human. The word was venom, dripping with disdain. You hold what is mine, my blood, my daughters. Return them, and I may grant you the mercy of a swift death. Elias's mouth was dry, his body trembling. Yet when he looked back at the children, Lyra's luminous eyes, Kesh's defiant hiss, Solin's small hands clutching his sleeve, something steadied him. He turned back to the calm. They're not yours anymore, he said quietly but firmly. They chose me. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Then Sirach's laughter rolled through the void, sharp and cold. Chosen? By vermin? They are bound by instinct, not choice. They cling to warmth, to heartbeat, as hatchlings do. Do not mistake weakness for love. Her words cut deep, but Elias held his ground. Call it what you want. Weakness, instinct, love. It doesn't matter. What matters is they're safe with me. Safer than they ever were with you. The daughters stirred at his words, their chirps rising in a chorus that cut through the silence. Sirach heard them, and though her expression did not soften, her claws trembled. For a brief moment, the great queen of the hive wavered. She had expected screams of hunger, of fear. Instead, she heard voices calling, not for her, but for him. The oracle's whispers returned to her mind. Blood or bond? Which will you claim? Her fleets waited for the order. One word, and Elias's ship would be torn apart, the human reduced. To ash, her daughters dragged back into the hive's grasp. Yet the thought of tearing them from his arms made something twist within her chest, something she had buried for centuries. Could it be that her daughters had found in him what she had never given, tenderness, shelter, warmth? Could she claim them by blood if they had already chosen bond? The queen's dilemma spread across the stars, unspoken but felt. Her armies hung in stillness. Elias held his daughters close, his body shaking but his voice steady as he whispered, I won't let them take you. And in that fragile space between rage and mercy, between blood and bond, the fate of empires trembled. The void was silent, but it was not peace. The hive's fleet hung in formation around the ardent voyager, their massive hulls blotting out the scattered starlight. The weight of 1,000 weapons pressed upon Elias's fragile ship, each one capable of reducing it to dust in an instant. In the center of the formation loomed Sirach's throne vessel, a monstrous living warship whose eyes burned with the same cold fire as its queen. Within, Sirach herself sat rigid, her claws twitching as she stared into the com-feed. She saw him clearly now, the human, gaunt but unyielding, clutching her daughters as though they were his own. Behind him, Lyra's eyes glowed defiant. Kesh hissed low and fierce, and Solon clung tightly to his arm, her tiny claws pressed to the pulse in his wrist. They were not afraid of him. They were afraid of losing him. Sirach's chest burned with a storm she could not name. Rage, yes, but also something more dangerous. A doubt that undermined the certainty of her rule. For centuries she had ruled, through fear, through blood, through strength. Yet these children, her children, had chosen a different path. They curled not against her throne, but against the heart of a fragile wanderer who should have meant nothing. Return them, she said again, though the command wavered beneath her fury. Return what is mine, and I will let you live. Elias's voice was quiet, but it carried through the calm like a blade. They aren't yours anymore. They made their choice. The words hung between them like a rift in the void. To the hives, generals shifted uneasily in their chambers. Drones hissed in agitation, and the oracles, hidden in shadow, whispered furiously. Sirach's claws dug into the throne's flesh until it bled. She wanted to deny him, to tear the children from his arms and remind them who had birthed them. But as she looked closer, she saw something she could not ignore. Their eyes. Not just glowing with alien light, but alive with something more. Trust, bond, love, none of which she had ever given them, because she had believed such things to be weakness. And yet here they were, alive, strong, fierce, and all because a fragile human had held them close and given them what she could not. For the first time in her reign, Sirach hesitated. Elias saw it, the crack in her armor, the fracture. In her certainty, he did not know how long it would last, so he pressed forward, his voice raw. You can kill me. You can burn this ship, wipe me from existence, but you'll never erase what they've found. You'll never unmake what we are. Lyra chirped. At that, a soft high sound that echoed through the calm. Kesh added her own hiss, low but steady. Solon's claws tapped against Elias's chest as if urging his heart to keep beating, Together, their voices wove a chorus that carried across the silence. Something broke within Serac. A memory long buried rose from the depths, her first brood long dead, clutching her in their infancy before war claimed them. She had forgotten the sound of their small voices, the way they had nestled against her, the way her heart had once softened before she hardened it with centuries of conquest. The weight of all she had lost pressed against her, and for a moment, the queen of the Hive was not a monster, but a mother. Her fleets waited for the command to fire. Instead, Serac raised a claw, and the order was silence. You would keep them, she said slowly, her voice heavy with both fury and sorrow. Raise them as your own. Make them forget me. Elias shook his head. No, they'll never forget you. You're their blood. But blood isn't enough. They deserve more. They deserve to choose. The silence stretched until it seemed the galaxy itself held its breath. Then Serac closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they gleamed not with rage, but with something colder, resigned. Then so be it. Keep them human. But know this. If you fail them, if you let harm touch them, I will tear the stars themselves apart to end you. The calm cut. One by one, the Hive ships shifted, their engines igniting, their shadows retreating into the void. Within minutes, the fleet was gone, leaving only the stillness of space and the quiet hum of the ardent Voyager. Elias sat trembling in the cockpit, unable to believe what had just happened. The daughters pressed against him, their bodies warm, their voices soft. He pulled them close, his heart pounding with relief, with awe, with terror of what lay ahead. Because the queen had not forgiven. She had not surrendered. She had only chosen bond over blood, for now. But in that fragile reprieve, a new destiny had begun. The daughters of the alien queen were no longer heirs of terror, nor trophies of war. They were something new, children of two worlds, bound by both blood and choice, carried forward in the arms of a human who had nothing but his fragile heart to offer. And as the ardent Voyager slipped back into the endless dark, Elias whispered to them, his voice steady at last, "Wherever the stars take us, we'll go together. A family. Always." They curled against him, their eyes glowing softly in the dim light, and for the first time in countless years, the void did not feel empty. New destiny among the stars had begun.